The tent had been cut open from the inside, not unzipped, not torn, sliced with a knife by someone already in it. 9 experienced hikers ran out of that tent into a -25-degree blizzard without their boots, without their coats, and without a reason anyone has ever been able to agree on. 70 years later, the Russian government says it was an avalanche. It wasn't. Here is what doesn't add up. Their names were Igor Dyatlov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, Lyudmila Dubinina, Rustam Slobodin, Alexander Kolovatov, Yuri Krivonischenko, Yuri Doroshenko, Nikolai Chabo-Brignol, and Semyon Zolotaryov. They were Soviet students and graduates, all of them experienced in winter expeditions. A 10th, Yuri Yudin, turned back early with joint pain. He was the only one who survived. When their ski trip was overdue, search parties went looking. They didn't find 9 hikers. They found 9 bodies spread across a kilometer of frozen slope, and each one of them was wrong in a different way. Footprints led away from the tent in a careful line, not panicked, not scattered. 9 sets of prints, some barefoot, some in a single sock, walking in formation down the mountain toward the tree line, a kilometer and a half below. Investigators followed those prints and noticed something that is still, to this day, the first thing that breaks any theory you try to build. The hikers were not running. They were walking, at night, into a blizzard, in their underwear. At the bottom of the slope, under a large cedar tree, searchers found the first 2 bodies, Krivonischenko and Doroshenko. They were lying next to the remains of a small fire. Their hands were burned. There were broken branches 30 feet up in the tree, snapped off where someone had tried to climb it. Whatever they were doing up there at night, barefoot, in -25, was important enough to tear the skin off their palms. That is not a detail the avalanche story has ever explained. 3 more were found strung out up the slope, between the cedar and the tent, as if they had tried to climb back up. Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, Slobodin. Slobodin had a fractured skull, a fracture that, according to the autopsy, could not have been delivered by a fall onto snow. That is the medical examiner's language, not mine, which raises the obvious question. If the snow didn't do it, what did? It took 2 more months to find the last 4. They were buried in a ravine under 4 meters of snow, 400 meters from the cedar, and their bodies are the reason this case has never closed. Thibaut Brignol had a skull fracture, 10.5 by 7 centimeters, described in the report as comparable to the impact of a moving car. Dubinina and Zolotaryov had crushed rib cages, multiple ribs on both sides, the kind of injury a medical examiner in 1959 compared to a high-speed traffic accident. And here's the part you're supposed to stop and look at. None of them had a single external bruise to match. No broken skin, nothing. Lyudmila Dubinina was missing her eyes. She was missing her tongue. She was missing a portion of her lips. The official report accounts for this as the action of scavengers on a body left in cold water for months. The unofficial, quieter objection from pathologists ever since has been simple. Scavengers do not selectively take the tongue from inside a closed mouth and leave the rest. Whatever this was, it happened before she froze. The Soviet Union, not known for volunteering information, quietly tested the hikers' clothing. Some of it was radioactive. Specifically, samples of Dubinina's sweater and Kolovatov's clothing showed beta-particle contamination, well above background. The lab report exists, the state ordered it, and then closed the case 3 months later with a sentence that has become famous. Cause of death, quote, a compelling natural force which the hikers were unable to overcome. That is the entire official explanation. Not an avalanche, not a storm, a compelling natural force. The hikers kept journals, they kept a camera, and on the last roll of film recovered from that camera, 2 frames stopped investigators cold. The first, taken the night of February 1st, shows what looks like a streak of bright light in the sky above the tree line. Not a clear object, not a flying saucer, a streak. The second frame, taken moments earlier, shows something walking toward the photographer through the snow and the trees. Tall, indistinct, not one of the 9. For years after, people living in the region reported to local authorities and to Soviet papers seeing bright orange spheres in the sky above the northern Urals on that same night and in the months that followed. These are not the claims of the internet. These are sworn witness statements in the original 1959 investigation file, which was declassified in 1990. In 2020, Russian prosecutors reopened the file and announced, with great ceremony, that they had finally solved the case. The cause, they said, was a slab avalanche. The hikers cut the tent, fled downhill, froze, got injured in the dark. Fair enough, except the slope at the tent site is measured at between 20 and 30 degrees, below the threshold where slab avalanches typically release. No avalanche debris was ever found. The tent itself was still mostly standing when searchers arrived. The trained winter hikers at the scene, the ones who actually looked at it in 1959, rejected the avalanche theory on the day they got there. The 2020 conclusion is an answer. It is not the answer the evidence gives. Line up the whole picture. 9 experienced people calmly walk out of a tent they cut open from the inside. They walk in formation 1.5 kilometers down a mountain with no boots into a blizzard. Some of them climb a tree. Some try to walk back up. 3 of them sustain injuries a pathologist says came from a moving vehicle. 1 of them is found without a tongue. Their clothes are radioactive. Witnesses across the region see orange lights in the sky that night. The state writes the phrase compelling natural force and locks the file for a quarter century. Every theory you have ever heard, avalanche, infrasound, katabatic wind, Yeti, secret weapons test, gets 1 or 2 of those pieces and has to pretend the rest don't exist. Whatever came out of the dark and into that tent on the night of February 2nd, 1959 was enough to make 9 experienced Soviet hikers pick a minus 25-degree blizzard over staying inside. They chose the mountain. They chose it in a hurry, and they chose it together. 70 years of investigation, 2 governments, a Supreme Court petition, and a reopened case later, no one has been able to say, in plain language, what they were running from. You tell us what that looks like, because we're not sure anymore. If this case kept you up, subscribe. We're working on the one most people have never heard of, the one 60 kilometers from here 19 years later with almost the same injury pattern. Until then,